Dr. Lena Moroz had worked the night shift at the Deep Space Network facility in Canberra for 7 years. It was a quiet job, mostly routine. Her job was to monitor radio waves from the outer reaches of the solar system, checking for signals that might come from passing spacecraft, distant asteroids, or cosmic background noise. Most nights were long and uneventful. She drank too much coffee, listened to old music, and stared at endless streams of data that never changed. That night began the same way. The large antenna array outside the facility was sweeping the sky as usual, tracing its slow, graceful arcs over the dark horizon. The room smelled of old electronics and cold metal. A soft hum filled the air. Lena sat in front of her monitor, tapping a pencil against her notepad as she compared 2 sets of readings. Everything looked normal, until it didn't. At first she thought it was interference. A faint, repeating pulse had appeared on the frequency bands reserved for deep space signals. It came every 42 seconds, steady and precise like the heartbeat of something alive. She adjusted the filters, changed frequencies, and ran diagnostic checks. Nothing explained it. The signal wasn't random. It was deliberate. Her colleague, Tomas, came over with a cup of tea, yawning. "Cosmic noise again?" he asked. Lena didn't answer. She leaned closer to the screen, her eyes wide. "No, look at this pattern." Tomas bent down, squinting. The pulse was repeating in a structured rhythm, long, short, long, like some form of code. He frowned. "It's too regular. Could it be from a probe?" "There's nothing out there," Lena whispered. "No active missions beyond Pluto right now." They both stared at the monitor. Outside, the wind pressed softly against the glass. Inside, the tiny blinking light of the incoming data kept flashing, steady, patient, waiting to be understood. Lena began recording everything. She sent the data through the facility's analysis software, which broke the signal down into binary code. Lines of numbers rolled across the screen, forming patterns that repeated again and again. She felt a shiver move through her. It wasn't random static. It wasn't human. By early morning, she had sent her findings to the International Signal Verification Center in Geneva. They confirmed her suspicion. The transmission was not of terrestrial origin. Its point of origin appeared to be somewhere beyond the Kuiper belt, far past the edge of our solar system. As the sun rose over Canberra, painting the facility in soft gold light, Lena stood by the window and watched. The world outside looked so peaceful. Birds flew over the antennas. Cars moved lazily on the distant roads. None of them knew that something extraordinary had just happened, that a message from another intelligence had reached Earth. Within 12 hours, every major observatory on the planet was scanning the same coordinates. NASA, ESA, Roscosmos, and private space companies all joined in the analysis. A quiet panic began to ripple through the scientific community. The pulse carried a repeating mathematical signature, a series of prime numbers, a universal way of saying we are intelligent. But there was something else embedded deep in the signal, a string of translated data that read like a desperate call for help. It took 3 days for linguists, code breakers, and AI systems to piece together the partial message. The phrase that finally emerged made Lena's blood run cold. The Deathworlders are coming. The news was not meant to reach the public. Governments quickly classified the information under the highest level of secrecy. The United Nations called an emergency meeting behind closed doors. Theories flew like sparks. Who were the Deathworlders? Was this a warning or a threat? Was the message sent to Earth by allies or by terrified victims? Lena felt torn between wonder and dread. For centuries, humanity had dreamed of hearing from another world. Now that it had happened, the first words were filled with fear. It was as if the universe itself had whispered a ghost story. In the following days, the facility buzzed with energy. Reporters began sniffing around after anonymous posts appeared on astronomy forums. Amateur radio operators from Japan to Argentina claimed they had caught faint echoes of the same signal. The world was beginning to suspect that something big was happening. Lena barely slept. Every night she returned to her console, running simulations, cleaning noise from the data, searching for more meaning in the strange pulse. The message seemed to have layers, like a voice hidden beneath another. She believed there was more, something the initial translation had missed. On the 5th night, she caught it. Deep inside the repeating code was a sequence of sound frequencies, modulated into something that almost resembled speech. When processed through a voice filter, it sounded like a whisper, faint, trembling alien. The voice spoke in broken syllables full of static and sorrow. It said, "We are dying. Please answer." Lena stared at the playback, unable to move. She played it again and again. It didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like a cry. She sent her findings to Geneva and waited. Hours later, her secure terminal flashed with a message. Confirmed. Preparing response. The human race was about to speak to another intelligence for the first time. Meanwhile, whispers spread online. A blurry photo of a classified report appeared on a forum before being deleted. It contained only 2 lines of text. Unknown signal source beyond Kuiper Belt. Content distress call. Social media exploded. News anchors speculated about alien contact. Scientists were suddenly in front of cameras, trying to explain while saying nothing. Governments tried to calm the storm, calling it routine deep space research. No one believed them. Lena felt the weight of what she knew pressing against her chest. Every human being had at some point looked at the night sky and wondered if someone else was out there. Now she knew for certain, and the someone out there was afraid. Weeks passed as the world tried to return to normal, but normal had changed. Satellite dishes everywhere turned toward the stars. Conspiracy theories and hope filled the air in equal measure. Late-night talk shows joked about aliens sending emails, but Lena couldn't laugh. She had heard the voice. Then came a night when the signal vanished. The pulse that had repeated for weeks suddenly stopped mid-transmission. Like a candle snuffed out by the wind, silence returned to the network. The quiet was heavier than before. For days there was no update. The world's telescopes found nothing. Then a faint echo appeared again. One final burst of data, shorter and weaker than before. The coordinates matched a moving object, something large traveling toward interstellar space. It was as if whoever sent the message had packed up everything they had and fled into the dark. Lena felt a strange sadness. Somewhere far beyond the cold edge of the solar system, a civilization had cried out, and humanity had barely heard them. Still, something about the words, "The Deathworlders are coming," echoed in her mind. Why would a dying race warn others about them? Were they warning Earth or warning someone else about Earth? Her thoughts were interrupted by a call from Geneva. The director's voice was tense. "Dr. Moraz, you are to join a classified working group. Effective immediately. Bring all data with you." She packed her notes, her drives, and the small photo of her family that always sat on her desk. As she stepped out into the cold night air, she looked up at the stars. They seemed brighter than ever, countless eyes watching silently from the void. In that moment, Lena understood that humanity's place in the universe had changed forever. The sky was no longer just a mystery. It was a conversation waiting to begin, and someone, somewhere, was already calling for help. The next day, military aircraft landed near the Canberra facility. Men in dark uniforms carried equipment into the communication center. Scientists whispered in corridors. Lena was escorted to a secure room filled with people she had never seen before. Officials, generals, linguists, and AI technicians. A large screen at the front of the room displayed the decoded signal. The waveform flickered like a heartbeat. The director pointed at it and said quietly, "This is history." Lena sat down, her hands trembling. For all her years of studying space, she had never truly expected to find life beyond Earth. Yet now, in that small room surrounded by strangers and secrets, she felt a strange mix of fear and awe. Outside, the night sky stretched endlessly, full of light that had traveled for millions of years. Somewhere out there, another world was waiting for an answer. Humanity had heard their call. What no one knew yet was whether answering it would save them or doom them all. 2 weeks after the first message stopped, the Deep Space Network went silent again. The sky had turned cold and ordinary, and humanity's excitement began to fade into uncertainty. People still talked about aliens on news channels and podcasts, but no one knew anything new. Governments refused to confirm or deny the truth. Dr. Lena Moraz kept working in secret, her team now part of an international research project hidden behind the name Astro Communications Defense Initiative. It sounded harmless, but everyone in the room knew it was something much larger. Then, one night, while the world slept, the second transmission arrived. It was weaker than the first, but longer. A thin beam of energy came from the same direction, beyond the Kuiper Belt, just outside the solar system. The pulse repeated slowly, forming strange symbols almost like glowing threads of meaning woven through static. It was less a message and more a voice crying through the dark. Lena sat in the control room, her heart racing as the patterns filled her screen. "It's them again," she whispered. She immediately began decoding. The system hummed, converting the alien transmission into visible data. Hours passed. When the sound finally emerged, it was different this time, clearer, more desperate. The words came through in fragments, each one trembling as if the speaker was afraid. "We are the Alethians," the voice said. "Please, help us. The Deathworlders are coming." No one moved. The room was filled with stunned silence. Then a man from the linguistics team whispered, "They're alive." The next 48 hours were chaos. The message was sent to decoding labs across the world. Every scientist wanted to know who the Alethians were, where they lived, and who the Deathworlders might be. What kind of being could make another species this terrified? When the message was translated completely, the answer shook everyone. The Alethians were a fragile race living in a nebula 20 light-years away, on a planet that glowed faintly from within, like a pearl inside a storm. Their bodies were made of light-sensitive cells that shimmered softly. They described their world as gentle, filled with rivers of gas and floating cities suspended in luminous air. They had no weapons, no concept of war. For thousands of years they had lived in peace, studying the stars and the energy fields that surrounded their home. Then came the Deathworlders. The Alethians spoke of them in tones of terror. They were not monsters, not demons, but something worse. A species born from a world so violent that only the strongest, toughest, and most ruthless creatures could survive. Their planet was full of fire, storms, and predators. They had learned to fight from the moment they were born. They had mastered tools, metal, and machines. And now they traveled through the stars, taking what they wanted. To the Alethians, Deathworlders were a legend of destruction, the storm that ends all things. The room grew colder as Lena read the details. The Alethians had seen the Deathworlders' ships in their skies. They described massive metallic forms, dark and scarred, covered with strange symbols. Energy weapons had burned their floating cities. Whole regions of their glowing world had gone silent. The Alethians begged anyone who could hear them to come to help, to stop the end that was already falling. When Lena reached the last part of the message, her breath caught. It said, "If you hear this, please, do not come from the death world. They will follow you. They will find us. We beg you. If you are from the world of storms, stay away." The scientists looked at one another in confusion. What world of storms? What death world were they talking about? Then it hit them. Earth was a death world. Compared to most planets, Earth was dangerous, full of diseases, volcanoes, earthquakes, deep oceans, freezing poles, and predators that never stopped hunting. Humans had evolved to fight everything their planet threw at them: fire, hunger, cold, and fear. They had learned to dominate their world through sheer willpower. To any peaceful alien species, humanity itself would look terrifying. Creatures that thrived on a deadly planet and even turned their dangers into strengths. Lena stared at the screen, the realization spreading through the room like fire. The Alethians weren't warning Earth about invaders. They were warning others about Earth. The next day, emergency meetings took place across the globe. The United Nations gathered behind closed doors. Intelligence agencies and scientists sat at the same tables, arguing about what to do. Some believed the Alethians were mistaken, that the Deathworlders were someone else entirely. Others, including Lena, weren't so sure. "If they think we're Deathworlders," one general said, slamming his fist on the table, "then we're already the monsters in their story." The debate turned fierce. Should humanity respond? What if answering their call for help made things worse? If the Alethians were already afraid of Deathworlders, and humans revealed themselves as being from Earth, they might run or even destroy the signal in terror. Still, the message was clear. They were dying. And humanity, despite its flaws, couldn't ignore a cry for help. Weeks turned into months as teams around the world studied the Alethian transmissions. Satellite dishes scanned the sky daily, hoping for another signal. People on Earth began to sense something was being hidden. A few journalists uncovered leaked documents, hinting that a peaceful alien race had made contact. Protests erupted in major cities. Some demanded full disclosure. Others begged the government not to bring alien attention to Earth. In the middle of the confusion, Lena kept working. The more she studied the Ilithians' voice, the more she felt a strange connection to them. There was something heartbreakingly human about their fear. They spoke about love, memory, and the beauty of their light fields. How they danced in their planet's thin atmosphere during the silver season, a time when their world glowed brightest. Their words were poetic and full of sadness. They sound so gentle, Lena whispered one evening, like they never learned what cruelty is. Her colleague Thomas nodded quietly. Maybe that's why they can't survive this. One morning, another fragment of the Ilithians' message appeared in the signal logs. It was faint, almost buried in static. This one wasn't a plea for help, but a confession. It said, "We once thought all life was kind. Then we saw your world. You live among storms. You breathe poison air. You kill to live. You are Deathworlders." Lena felt a chill go down her spine. To the Ilithians, humanity was a horror story. At the same time, a strange sense of guilt began to spread among the scientists. Humans had always imagined themselves as explorers, dreamers, the ones who reached out to the stars. But now, for the first time, they had to wonder if the universe saw them as something else entirely. A danger, a legend to fear. The Ilithians' situation grew worse. Their last messages described power grids collapsing, their energy crystals failing, and their skies filled with dark machines. The voice became weaker, fading with each transmission. Sometimes, between the static, Lena thought she heard screams, thin, echoing sounds like glass breaking underwater. Then one night, the final words came through. "If the Deathworlders find you, run." After that, there was nothing. Silence swallowed everything again. On Earth, the debate turned into panic. Some countries argued that humanity should stay quiet and hidden, not to draw attention to itself. Others believed that if the Ilithians were dying, humans had a duty to help. For the first time in history, the world wasn't divided by nations but by fear of the unknown. Meanwhile, religious groups called it a sign of destiny. They said humanity was being tested to see whether it would choose mercy or pride. Philosophers wrote about cosmic empathy, while soldiers prepared for defense operations just in case. Lena was called to New York to brief the United Nations Science Council. She walked into the grand chamber filled with diplomats, generals, and world leaders. The large screen behind her showed the Ilithians' planet, a pale blue light surrounded by swirling clouds of silver. "This species reached out to us," she said, her voice steady. "They are dying, and they believe we are the monsters who haunt their legends. If we ignore them, they will perish. If we help them, we might prove that the universe is wrong about us." The room was quiet. A delegate from France asked softly, "And if they're right? If we are the Deathworlders?" Lena hesitated, then said, "Then maybe it's time we become something better." Her words echoed through the chamber. The decision wasn't easy, but humanity finally agreed to act. They would form a coalition, a fleet not for war but for aid. The plan was to send ships equipped with medical, scientific, and diplomatic units to find the Ilithians' world and offer help. It would be called Operation Shepherd, named after the idea of guiding the lost. Still, the irony remained sharp. To save the Ilithians, humans would have to prove they weren't what the universe feared. As Lena left the meeting, she looked up at the stars visible through the tall windows. Somewhere out there, a fragile people waited in the dark, praying that monsters never arrived. And soon, humanity would answer their call, knowing full well that in someone else's eyes, they were the monsters. The world changed completely after the United Nations announced Operation Shepherd. For the first time in history, every major nation agreed to work together without rivalry. Scientists, engineers, doctors, and diplomats gathered from every continent to prepare a mission that had never been attempted before: an interstellar rescue. The goal was simple on paper but massive in scale: reach the Ilithians' world, help them survive, and prove that humanity was not the monster they feared. Dr. Lena Mraz stood inside the Space Research Command Center in Geneva, staring at a holographic map of the stars. The Ilithians' home, identified as E17 Nebula Colony, glowed faintly at the edge of the display. 20 light-years away. It looked close, but the distance was almost impossible to cross with current technology. Yet humanity had no choice but to try. Newspaper headlines around the world called it the Mission of Mercy. Millions watched live broadcasts of the fleet's construction. Spaceports that once built military ships now worked side by side with scientists to design new types of vessels. These weren't warships. They were built to carry hope. Each vessel was named after virtues: courage, unity, promise, and solace. The flagship was named Shepherd 1. It carried the best of humanity: scientists, linguists, engineers, and medics from over 50 countries. Lena was chosen as Chief Communications Officer, in charge of maintaining contact with Earth and hopefully the Elythians. When the announcement was made, people across the world cheered. But not everyone was happy. Some groups protested, saying humanity was walking into a trap. What if the Elythians aren't real? They argued. What if the signal was bait to lure Earth into danger? Others said Earth shouldn't interfere in alien affairs. We can barely manage peace on our own planet, one senator said. How can we play saviors to another? Lena ignored the arguments. For her, it wasn't about politics. It was about doing what felt right. A voice had cried out from the stars, and she couldn't forget the fear in that message. If there was even a small chance to help, humanity had to take it. Months passed as the fleet was prepared. Powerful new engines based on quantum slipstream technology were developed in secret laboratories. Artificial intelligence systems were designed to translate alien languages instantly and handle diplomacy if communication failed. When the launch day came, the world stopped to watch. Billions of people gathered around screens, holding their breath as the fleet rose into the sky. 20 ships gleamed like silver arrows against the darkness. They carried flags from every nation, woven together into one symbol, a circle of light around a small blue planet. Lena stood at the observation window of Shepherd 1, her reflection faintly visible against the stars. The engines rumbled below and the Earth shrank slowly in the distance. Her heart felt heavy and proud at the same time. Tomas, now commander of communications, smiled beside her. Can you believe it? We're actually doing this. Lena nodded. For once, the whole planet is on the same side. The fleet drifted beyond the moon, then Mars, then out toward the edge of the solar system. The silence of deep space surrounded them like a vast ocean. Life aboard the ships became a mixture of discipline and wonder. Crews from different cultures learned to work together. Meals were shared, languages mixed, and music echoed in corridors where only the hum of machinery had existed before. Lena often walked through the observation decks where crew members stared at the endless field of stars, whispering prayers or simply watching in awe. Yet beneath the beauty, there was unease. The crew couldn't forget what they were called, the Deathworlders. During one long night shift, Lena joined a small group in the mess hall. They were quiet, lost in their thoughts. Finally, a young engineer spoke up. What if they see us the way we see wild animals? Dangerous, unpredictable. Lena looked at him gently. Then we'll show them that strength can protect, not destroy. Weeks turned into months as the fleet traveled through the void. Every day, Lena monitored the signal that guided them toward the Elythian world. The transmission grew weaker as they got closer, as if the source was fading away. Sometimes she thought she could still hear faint echoes of the Elythian's voice. Back on Earth, media networks followed every step of the mission. Children drew pictures of spaceships and glowing aliens. Poets wrote verses about humanity's journey to kindness. For a brief moment, the world forgot its conflicts. But space had its own challenges. The farther the fleet went, the more their systems were tested. Navigation errors, radiation storms, and unexpected gravitational waves threatened their progress. On one occasion, a communication satellite was destroyed by a burst of cosmic dust. Lena spent sleepless nights repairing damaged data links and re-establishing contact with Earth. Despite the hardships, morale stayed high. The crew believed in their purpose. They were more than explorers. They were ambassadors of hope. After 8 long months, the fleet entered the boundary of the Elythian Nebula. The sight took everyone's breath away. The entire sky shimmered with color. Streams of pink and blue gases twisting around distant stars like ribbons of light. The nebula pulsed softly, as if alive. "This is it," Lena whispered. The navigation officer nodded. Coordinates confirmed. The Elythian world is inside that cluster. As the ships moved deeper, strange readings appeared on their sensors. Energy fields flickered, disrupting communication for a few seconds at a time. It felt as though the space around them was whispering. Then the first images of the Elythian planet appeared. It was unlike anything humans had seen. A glowing sphere surrounded by luminous clouds half covered in shadow. Parts of it sparkled like diamond dust, while other regions were dark and silent. The crew stared in silence. The planet looked wounded. As they entered orbit, the truth became clear. Whole cities hung in ruins. Fragments of floating structures drifted through the upper atmosphere. Once bright towers now lay dark and broken. The Elythians' gentle world had been shattered by something vast and merciless. A murmur spread through the command deck. "Are we too late?" Someone whispered. Lena ran a scan. "No, there's life down there. Weak signals, but they're there." Suddenly, their communication system crackled. A faint voice broke through the static. A trembling sound that made Lena's heart stop. "Deathworlders. Stay away." The voice was Elythian. It sounded afraid. Lena replied softly, "We're not here to harm you. We came to help." There was silence, then the voice returned, uncertain. "You are from the world of storms?" Lena hesitated. "Yes, we are from Earth." A long pause followed. Then the signal ended. The room was quiet. Everyone looked at Lena, unsure what would happen next. For hours there was no response. Then small energy beacons began to appear on the planet's surface. They formed a pattern, a landing zone. The Elythians had given them permission to come. The fleet prepared for descent. As Shepard 1 entered the atmosphere, the clouds shimmered like liquid glass. The air was thin and filled with glowing particles. The landscape below looked like a sea of crystal plains broken by floating islands. When the ship landed, the crew put on environmental suits and stepped outside. The ground was soft and luminous under their boots. It was silent except for a faint hum that seemed to come from the planet itself. Then they saw them, the Elythians. They were tall, graceful beings made of translucent light. Their bodies shimmered with shifting colors like sunlight through water. Their faces were delicate, without mouths or eyes, yet their emotions seemed to flow through their light. The moment they saw the humans, the Elythians stepped back in fear. Their glow dimmed. Lena slowly raised her hand. "We're not your enemies," she said through her translator. "We came because you asked for help." For a moment, nothing happened. Then one Elythian moved forward, its light trembling. It reached out, touching the air between them. The translator picked up a soft vibration. "You came from the death world, yet you bring peace?" Lena smiled inside her helmet. "Yes, we came to save you." The Elythians led the humans to their surviving city, a collection of floating structures held together by energy bridges. There Lena saw the true damage. Entire sections of the city were gone, torn apart by strange black machines that still floated lifelessly in the skies. "These are what destroyed us," one Elythian said. "They came from the void, machines of harvest. They do not live. They only take." Human engineers and soldiers studied the wreckage. The machines were massive drones powered by ancient cores, built by some civilization long extinct. They had no master anymore, only programming to consume energy, strip resources, and move on. Humanity had finally found the real Deathworlders, not living beings, but the leftover ghosts of a dead empire. Lena felt both relief and sorrow. The Elythians had feared humans for nothing, yet their suffering was real. Humanity had a chance to show its true nature, and they did. Doctors treated the Elythians' injuries. Engineers rebuilt power grids. Scientists shared energy technologies. The Elythians, once trembling, began to trust the strange creatures from the storm planet. Weeks passed, and the broken cities started to glow again. The humans stayed to help, repairing and teaching. One evening, Lena stood on a high platform overlooking the nebula. The Elythian leader floated beside her, its light now bright and calm. "Your world is fierce," it said, "yet your hearts are kind. We feared you because we did not understand." Lena looked at the stars. "We were afraid too. Maybe that's what makes us the same." In that quiet moment, surrounded by the light of two worlds, she realized what Operation Shepherd truly meant. Humanity hadn't just crossed the stars to save another species. They had come to save their own soul. The Elythian sky shimmered like a living ocean of light. Colors drifted and changed slowly, painting the horizon with hues that no human eye had ever seen before. Lena Moroz stood at the viewport of Shepard 1, staring down at the glowing planet below. They had been there for 3 weeks now, working day and night to help the Elythians rebuild their world. Every morning began with repairs, communication training, and data exchanges between human scientists and Elythian scholars. Every evening ended with exhaustion and awe. Despite the beauty, a shadow of unease lingered. Something about the ruins didn't make sense. The black machines that had attacked the Elythians, massive, cold, and ancient, did not move anymore, but their designs were strange. They weren't alien in the way Lena expected. Their mechanical frames, their energy cores, even their logic chips, everything resembled early human military technology. It was as if the machines had been made by a species not too different from Earth's own. Lena spent long hours studying the data. The Elythians called the attackers the Devourers. They believed the machines came from the Deathworlders, the legendary destroyers of civilizations. But the more Lena learned, the more she began to doubt that story. One evening, she sat with an Elythian elder named Siren, who was one of the last living historians of their kind. His light flickered softly like a candle in the wind. "We never saw the Deathworlders themselves," he explained. "Only their creations. The Devourers destroy, harvest, and leave. We thought they were servants of the Stormborn species." Lena frowned. What if those machines outlived their creators? What if they're just following old orders long after their masters died? Saren tilted his glowing form as if thinking. Machines without souls carrying out a war that ended long ago? His light dimmed sadly. That would be a cruel fate, for them, and for us. Back on the ship, Lena brought her theory to the mission leaders. Commander Jin, a calm and practical woman from South Korea, listened carefully. "You're saying no living Deathworlders attacked them?" "I'm saying we might be chasing ghosts," Lena replied. "Machines running a forgotten command. The Elythians have been fighting shadows." The room went silent. It was a relief and a tragedy all at once. Humanity wasn't the monster the galaxy feared, but something humanity-like had once existed out there, powerful enough to leave its weapons behind like cursed relics. Despite the discovery, the fleet continued its mission. Human engineers built shields around Elythian cities to prevent further attacks. Medical teams used nanotech to heal their fragile bodies. The Elythians slowly began to trust their strange, heavy-footed allies. At first, they couldn't stand being near the humans. Their sensors reacted violently to human biological signals, heartbeat rhythms, temperature, even scent. To them, humans were like walking storms, radiating energy from a world of chaos. But as time passed, they began to see something more. Humans didn't destroy. They fixed, protected, and comforted. Lena noticed it most in the children. Elythian children, faint glowing orbs of gentle light, would hover around the engineers as they worked. They imitated human laughter, curious about everything. One even followed Lena around, calling her the Storm Friend. She loved it. For the first time in her life, she felt she was doing something that truly mattered. Then one night, everything changed. A deep vibration passed through the ground. The air shimmered. The lights in the city dimmed and flickered. The humans thought it was another power failure until the alarms blared on every ship in orbit. Something enormous was approaching from the void beyond the nebula. Lena rushed to the command center. On the main screen, she saw a field of dark objects moving toward the Elythian system, hundreds of them. Black ships shaped like knives gliding through the gas clouds. "Devourers," whispered Commander Jin. "A whole fleet of them." The Elythians began to panic. Their energy fields pulsed erratically. Their voices filled the communication channels with fear. "They have found us again. The Deathworlders have come." Lena felt her stomach twist. These weren't Deathworlders, they were their machines. But there was no time to explain. The human fleet scrambled into defensive formation. Shields went up, weapons powered on. The first attack came like a storm of light. Beams of energy cut through space, striking Shepard 2 and burning through its side. The crew barely had time to escape before the ship exploded in a cloud of silver sparks. "Return fire," Commander Jin shouted. Human ships fired kinetic rounds, electromagnetic pulses, and plasma bursts. The sky above the Elythian planet turned into a battlefield of glowing arcs and shadows. The Devourers didn't move like normal ships, they swarmed like insects, endless and cold. Lena worked furiously at her station, trying to decode their communication signals. Maybe they could be reasoned with, redirected, but the data made no sense. The machines were operating on an ancient program written in a language no one fully understood. Through the chaos, the Elythians watched in horror. For generations, they had only known fear. Now they saw something different. Humans standing between them and annihilation. Commander Jin's voice rang through the fleet channel. "This is not a battle for conquest. This is a rescue. Hold the line." For hours, the fighting raged. Human ships were faster and smarter, but the Devourers were endless. Every time one was destroyed, another took its place. Finally, Lena found something. A faint repeating signal within the enemy transmissions. It was old Earth binary code. Her heart stopped. The machines weren't alien at all. They were of human origin. She shouted, "Commander, they're ours!" They were built by humans. The room went silent for a moment. Then Jin spoke softly. "That's impossible." Lena pulled up the data on screen. These machines were launched hundreds of years ago, maybe during the early colonization wars. They were programmed to terraform planets by consuming resources, but they never stopped. They've been doing it ever since. It was horrifying. The legendary Deathworlders were not some alien monsters. They were human creations, remnants of a forgotten past. Realizing this, Lena sent a coded message to the Devourers using old Earth command protocols. For minutes, nothing happened. Then slowly, some of the machines began to hesitate. Their formation wavered. The attack slowed. She kept transmitting, tears streaming down her face. "You don't need to fight. You've done enough. Stand down." The Devourers paused, then one by one, their engines dimmed. The battlefield fell quiet. The Elythians stared from below, unable to believe what they saw. The Deathworlders' fleet had stopped. The monsters had laid down their arms. Lena slumped in her chair, exhausted. The truth was both beautiful and terrible. Humanity had once created destruction so vast that it became legend. But now, humanity had returned to undo its own sins. After the battle, the survivors worked together to deactivate and dismantle the remaining Devourers. The Elythians watched as human engineers carefully disassembled the machines that had haunted their world for centuries. They didn't use violence, they used understanding. When the last machine was silenced, the Elythian skies glowed brighter than they had in generations. For the first time in their history, there was peace. Lena and Commander Jin stood on the planet's surface, watching the sunrise ripple across the glowing plains. The Elythians floated around them, their bodies shining with soft blue light. Saren, the elder historian, approached Lena. "For ages we feared the Deathworlders. Now we know they were human hands reaching through time. You have turned fear into mercy." Lena looked at him quietly. "We were the cause once. We had to be the cure." The Elythians bowed, their lights forming a circle of silver around the humans. In that moment, both species stood together, not as predator and prey, not as myth and reality, but as equals sharing the same sky. Later that night, Lena recorded her report for Earth. She described everything, the discovery, the truth about the Devourers, the victory. Her voice trembled slightly as she said, "We found our ghosts in another world and we faced them with open hands instead of weapons. If this is what it means to be a Deathworlder, then maybe the universe still has hope." When the transmission ended, she walked outside. The stars shimmered like living eyes above the nebula. Somewhere far across the galaxy, other civilizations might still whisper stories about the Deathworlders. Lena smiled faintly. Let them whisper, she thought. Let them believe the monsters became guardians. Behind her, the Elythian children laughed softly, chasing trails of light across the air. The sound was delicate, like wind through glass. For the first time in a long time, the galaxy was quiet. Humanity had not just saved a world, they had redeemed themselves. And in that silence, Lena finally understood what it meant to answer a call for help from the stars. It wasn't just about saving others. It was about proving that even creatures born from a death world could choose to be kind. The journey home was quieter than anyone expected. The human fleet drifted through the vast silence of space, their engines glowing faintly like fireflies moving through the night. After the terrible battles, the explosions, and the endless fear, the stillness felt strange. Inside the ships, the crew worked in slow, peaceful rhythm, repairing what they could and remembering what they had seen. Lena Mora spent many hours alone by the observation window of Shepherd 1, watching the stars stretch into long trails of silver. Every time she closed her eyes, she could still see the Elythians, their glowing forms dancing under the rebuilt sky, their laughter echoing in that strange, musical language. They were safe now. The last of the Devourer machines had been shut down, their twisted bodies scattered across the nebula like fallen statues. It should have been a victory without sadness, yet Lena's heart was heavy. She had helped save a world, but she couldn't forget the truth she had uncovered. The Deathworlders were not monsters from some unknown planet. They were human creations. Humanity had once built those machines, unleashed them into the universe, and then forgotten them. The Aletheans had suffered because of that forgotten past. Lena wondered what Earth would think when they heard the truth. Would they feel proud of their scientists and soldiers who had risked their lives to help another species? Or would they feel ashamed that their old mistakes had caused so much pain? She didn't know. All she knew was that the story had to be told honestly. Commander Jin visited her often during the long journey home. "You look like someone carrying the weight of two worlds," Jin said one evening, offering Lena a cup of hot tea. "You did everything right, you know." Lena smiled faintly. "Did we? We fixed something we broke without realizing it." "That's not heroism, that's responsibility." Jin nodded slowly. "Maybe, but responsibility is rarer than heroism. It means you understand your place in the story." Those words stayed with Lena. She began to write her final report, not as a list of technical details or mission results, but as a message. She wanted her words to travel farther than the ships, farther than Earth, maybe even farther than the Milky Way. She wrote about what she had seen, the fear in the Aletheans' eyes when they first saw humans, the courage of the engineers repairing their cities, the light that filled the sky when peace returned. She described the way the Alethean children had called her Storm Friend, and how that simple phrase had changed her forever. Her message began simply, "We are not what the universe believes. We are what we choose to be." She paused, reread it, and then kept writing. "We were born on a planet that tried to kill us every day. Our home burned, froze, and shook with storms and quakes. We learned to survive by fighting, building, and changing. Maybe that's why other worlds fear us. But we have learned something greater than survival. We have learned compassion." When she finished, she sealed the message into a long-range beacon and sent it out into the stars. It would drift across space for centuries, maybe longer, carrying the truth about humanity to anyone who cared to listen. The rest of the journey passed in calm routine. The crew told stories to fill the quiet hours. Some talked about the cities they would return to: Tokyo, Nairobi, Sao Paulo, Mumbai. Others dreamed about writing books or making movies about their adventure. The youngest crew member, Ensign Farid, joked that one day kids would study this mission in school, and everyone laughed. When the fleet finally reached the edge of the solar system, the first signal from Earth arrived. The message was simple: "Welcome home, Shepherd Fleet. The world is waiting." As their ships entered Earth's orbit, the blue marble filled their viewports. It looked fragile and beautiful, wrapped in clouds, glowing in the sunlight. For a moment, no one spoke. The entire crew simply stared, reminded that they too came from a world of storms and miracles. When they landed, the welcome was enormous. People filled the airfields with flags, music, and cheers. Every country on Earth celebrated together, something that had not happened in a very long time. Children held up signs that said "Heroes of the Stars" and "Hope for the Universe." Lena stepped off the ship, blinking at the brightness of the sky. Reporters rushed forward, cameras flashed, and officials surrounded Commander Jin, asking questions about the mission. Lena felt dizzy from the noise after so many months in silence. She wanted to tell everyone the truth, that this wasn't just a story about saving aliens. It was a story about saving themselves. Later that night, after the ceremonies and the celebrations, she found herself standing alone by the ocean. The waves moved slowly under the moonlight, whispering like the Aletheans' voices. She thought about how different the two worlds were, one made of water and stone, the other of light and air, and yet both needed the same thing: kindness. Her communicator buzzed softly. It was Commander Jin. "The United Nations wants to speak to you tomorrow," she said. "They're preparing a memorial for the ones we lost, and they're planning a message to send to the Aletheans to say thank you." Lena nodded, though Jin couldn't see her. "Good. They deserve to know we're still listening." When the call ended, Lena lifted her eyes to the sky. Somewhere up there, the Aletheans were watching the same stars, maybe even thinking about their human friends. She smiled and whispered, "We're not monsters. Not anymore." Over the next few weeks, humanity changed in quiet ways. Scientists from every nation began working on new communication technology, not for war but for peace. Artists painted murals of glowing beings and human explorers standing side by side. Children in schools studied the Alethean songs, learning their strange melodic language. The word Deathworlder, once a symbol of fear, began to mean something new. Someone strong enough to survive and gentle enough to care. Lena's report spread across the world. News networks played her message, and it touched billions of hearts. People cried when they heard her voice say, "We are what we choose to be." The phrase became a symbol of hope, carved on walls, written in letters, whispered in speeches. Months passed, and the world moved forward. The Shepherd fleet was rebuilt and expanded, now joined by volunteers from dozens of countries. Their mission was no longer just exploration, it was connection. They would seek out other civilizations, not to conquer or claim, but to listen and help. Humanity, once divided by borders and fear, began to see itself as one family beneath the same stars. One evening, Lena was invited to the newly built Hall of the Starborn, a great circular building filled with light. Inside, holographic displays showed the Elysian planet, the shimmering skies, the glowing rivers, the rebuilt towers. The hall was quiet except for a soft hum of music. On the central screen, a live signal appeared. It was the Elysians. Their leader, Saren, now surrounded by children of soft light, spoke through the translator. "To the people of Earth, we send our gratitude. You are no longer Deathworlders in our stories. You are the shepherds of the void, the ones who came when we called. May your storms bring life, not fear." The crowd stood in silence, many with tears in their eyes. For a moment, humanity and Elysians were one, connected through light and memory. After the ceremony, Lena walked outside again. The stars were bright, scattered like diamonds on a dark sea. She remembered the first day she had seen the Elysian message, the strange pulse that had started it all. So much had changed since then. The universe was no longer a cold, empty place filled with dangers. It was alive, full of voices waiting to be heard. As she stood there, a small girl approached her. The child had watched the ceremony and carried a little glowing orb in her hands, a toy shaped like an Elysian child. "Miss Lena," she said shyly, "will they ever come to visit us?" Lena smiled. "Someday, yes. And maybe by then we'll be ready to show them how beautiful our world is." The girl nodded and ran back to her parents, her laughter ringing like music. Lena turned back to the sky. Somewhere out there, her message was still traveling, carried on invisible waves of light. Maybe far away another species would find it and wonder who the Deathworlders really were. Maybe they would learn that even a world full of storms could create kindness strong enough to cross galaxies. The wind blew softly, carrying the scent of salt and rain. Lena closed her eyes and whispered to the stars, "We answered your call. Now it's your turn." The ocean shimmered in the moonlight as if the universe itself was smiling. The Deathworlders had come not as destroyers but as healers. And somewhere in the quiet between worlds, the legend of humanity was being rewritten. Not in fear, but in hope.